Hi, welcome to Takumi Go. In this video, I would like to share my view on the GOAT of Go players. So, it's very common to discuss who is the greatest of all time in the field of football or the basketball, different kinds of sport events. But in Go, who would be considered as the greatest of all time? Here, it's always a fun and chill discussion because everyone will have their own opinion about who would be the greatest of all time, and I don't think there would be an objective answer for that. And also, they will become a battle of the generations. Some people would believe the 19th century players would be better, or the 20th century players to be better, or some people would think the modern players are the best. Everyone has their own opinions of which generation would be better. Because after all, we cannot compare the strength of different players if they come from different generations, even if they have some goal records. For example, Go Seigen still played some games in the 70s or 80s, but that's already not his prime. His prime was in 1940s to 1950s, and you could not use the game result of Go Seigen in the 1970s or 1980s as a reference to represent the strength of Go Seigen. Every player I'm going to mention in these videos have their own prime period, and it's impossible to compare the strength of their prime period. We could only compare the achievements of these players. So, who were the Go players who have stood above the rest throughout the history? Let's see. The first one, I would say, would be the Honinbo Shusaku. Honinbo Shusaku was a Go player in the 19th century. His original name was Kuwahara Shusaku. His famous game is the ear reddening move. But this game was not the reason I think he is a GOAT of Go players. The reasons I think he should be considered one of the greatest of all time is because this result. 19 straight wins in the annual castle games, or I would call the Oshiroko. This result is fabulous. Since 1849 until the 1861, in these 12 years, he played 19 games of the Oshiroko, and he won all of them. That means he was invincible until his death in 1862. That totally makes him the greatest of all time. It's also very famous that when Shusaku played as black, he will use the Shusaku opening. He rarely loses a game in black. This was the Shusaku opening. The diagonal move is the famous move suggested by Shusaku. This move was considered as not efficient since the 1950s until the AI comes. Players from the 1950s to the 21st century thought that the pincer would be a more efficient approach, as the black need to return the komi in the modern Go after 1950s. But according to AI, even black need to return the komi. This diagonal move was still a good move, and if black do not need to return the komi, this would be a perfect choice. Shusaku really showed a good understanding of opening in his game. It's very recommended to check out some of his game. He was very good in opening and analyzing the situation. Many Chinese players may not agree Shusaku to be one of the greatest of all time, because comparing to the Chinese players in Qing dynasties, they don't think the Japanese players were more superior. There were some great Chinese players in the Qing dynasty, like the Huang Longxi or Fan Xiping. They showed a very excellent skills in combat that even many professionals nowadays could not match with. However, the fact is that we could not compare their strength. We could not argue which players are better, the Chinese players in Qing dynasty or the Japanese players in the Edo period, that means the 19th century. We could not compare that. We could only comparing their achievements. And the fact is that in the Edo period, Japan had the annual castle games, which is the Oshiroko. These tournaments were official tournaments held by the Tokyo government. It was totally a national level tournament. Prize and official titles would be awarded to the winner. So this was an important tournament. Yet, Shusaku dominated it for 12 years. I think with this record, Shusaku should be regarded one of the greatest of all time. And the second greatest of all time is of course Go Seigen. He was a Chinese and became the Japanese professional player when he was 14. Between 1939 and 1956, he outmatched all the top players in Jubango, and forcing not all of them, there is some typo, forcing many of them down to handicaps. The Jubango means the contest between two players, consisting of 10 games. In these 15 years, he outmatched so many players. This record was crazy. Still, there will be some people who do not agree he was the greatest of all time. Let's see what is their opinion. Some suggested that, since the 1960s, after Japan's economics started to rise, there were various of title matches, but Go Seigen's achievement in these title matches was not outstanding. But we need to understand the fact that he was struck by a motorcycle in 1961 and was hospitalized for 2 months. Since then, his ability was declined. And he was also 50 years old in the 1960s, so he was not in his prime anymore. As a result, although he could not get very excellent achievement since the 1960s, his achievement between 1939 to 1956 was gorgeous. And also some would argue that the competition of Go was more intense since the 1980s. But after all, forcing all of the top players from the same era down to handicaps was totally remarkable and unrivaled. And with this record, definitely a GOAT. And then a more controversial one, Sakata Eio. He was 6 years younger than Go Seigen. And why I think he should be also considered as one of the greatest of all time is because of the following achievement. In 1964, he achieved 30 wins and 2 losses in a single year. He only lost 2 games. In 1961, he held 7 major titles, and in 1963, he became the first player to simultaneously hold both titles of Meijin and Honinbo, which at the time were the biggest title in Japan. Now the biggest title is the Kisei, but at that time Meijin and Honinbo was the greatest, and Sakata hold them at the same time. In the 1964, he held 7 major titles once again, including the Meijin Honinbo Nihonkin Championship, Asahi Pro Best 10, Oza, Nihonkin the First, and NHK Cup. And in 1964 to 1966, the Honinbo title challenge, he defeated Takagawa Kaku, Yamabe Toshiro, and Fujisawa Hideyuki in all strict 4 vs 0 without losing any games. This record was crazy, and with this record, I think he should be regarded one of the greatest of all time. Of course, there would be some controversy. The first is that he lost against Go Seigen in the Jubango in 1953 to 1954. So, the problem is, if you could only choose one player to be the greatest of all time, it should belongs to Go Seigen, because he is the one who beat Sakata Eio. But the fact is that in 1960, Sakata Eio outmatched Go Seigen, and his records in the 1960s was totally insane. Another controversial point is that he ranks only the 4th in the total number of titles in Japan. You can see the list. Chochi-kun, Yamayuta, and Kobayashi Koichi was ahead of Sakata Eio. I think the fact that he totally dominated the professional Go tournaments in 1961 to 1965, and he also defeated Go Seigen in that period, could make him one of the GOATs. The fact that he did not have as much as the titles than Chochikun or Yamayuta is because Chochikun and Yamayuta started to get titles in their 20s, but Sakata Eio only started to get more titles since the 40s because there are only a few title tournaments before the 1960s. So you could not comparing this data equally with players from different era. And I think the record he made in this page was insane. So I would like to consider him one of the greatest of all time. Lastly, Chang-ho. I think this is totally not controversial. 21 international titles, which is the world record. In the Three Nation Cup tournament, which was also known as the Non-Shin Cup, he once achieved a 14 compo, that means 14 strict wins, and won the decisive games 9 times. This record was also very fabulous. In a long period of time, Chinese players and Japanese players were so desperate to play against him, as he just won all the decisive games. He is totally the modern greatest of all time. Now let's talk about some controversial candidates. The first one is Lee Sedol. He also has 18 international titles, and he defeated his best opponent, Guli, in the Jubango. In the period, I think between 2005 to around 2012, Guli and Lee Sedol was the two best players in the world. And as a result, some organization hold a Jubango for them, and Lee Sedol was the winner. So he proved him to be the greatest player in the 20s. However, he did not get as many titles as Lee Chang-ho. He also did not perform outstandingly in group tournaments. These two defects makes his achievements not in par with Lee Chang-ho. So if we could only have a limited choice of greatest of all time, it should be Lee Chang-ho, but not Lee Sedol. And another controversial candidate would be Kurze. Why Kurze could also be considered as one of the greatest of all time is because he also has 8 international titles, and in his prime, 2017, he once achieved a 20 straight wins, and in 2014 to the 2016, his win rate in the Chinese League A achieved 80%. Yet, he totally still needs more international titles to prove him a greatest of all time, while his tournament results declined rapidly since 2023. So his chance to become a greatest of all time become less possible. And also, Yamayuta. Since 1960, when title tournaments became the main stage for Japanese professional Go players, Yamayuta achieved the best result that even Chochikun, Koyabashi Koichi, or Sakata Eio could not match with. However, since the 1990s, there are a new stage, which is the international tournaments. And if a professional player need to prove themselves to be the greatest player, they need international titles. While Chochikun, Koyabashi Koichi both succeed to win some titles in world tournaments, Yamayuta did not get any titles in world tournaments. As a result, it's very difficult to consider Yamayuta to be the greatest of all time. As a result, in my opinion, the 4 greatest of all time would be Honinbo Shusaku, sorry I did not translate, Go Seigen, Sakata Eio, and Lee Chang-ho. Will Shinjin So become the 5th one? We will see in the coming 5 years. That's all for this video. Please share your thoughts with us and let's discuss this topic.